almost all in here. We're ready to go with Chef Look Cooks and the best damn chowder on Martha's Vineyard. Take it away, Chris.
Awesome. I hope you guys are gonna like it. One of the reasons why this is the best damn chowder on Martha's Vineyard is that we're gonna be using actual live quahogs. These were actually taken out of, I believe, Katama Bay yesterday. So this is about as fresh as you can get. While I was washing them, a couple of them were open because I kept them on my porch since it was so cold last night, and they close right up really quick, which is always a good way to tell if they're still fresh. Open seafood is usually a bad sign, but a lot of seafood will open when they're out of water, especially if they get really cold. So just give them a little tap or squeeze them, and if they stay closed again, they're fine. They were just taking a little rest. So what I did is I rinsed all my quahogs, make sure they're nice and clean. You don't want too much extra sand in there. We are going to strain the broth later, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem, but it helps a lot just to keep everything clean. I've got all my mise en place together. Mise en place is something you will hear me talk about every single episode. It's basically all of the ingredients that you need to complete the dish, and you put them all right in front of you, all right next to your stove. And that way, when you're cooking, you don't ever have to leave, which means you can do crazy things like I'm about to do, like cook a whole chowder, including the steaming the clams in hopefully under an hour. So I did do a bunch of chopping beforehand, but I'm going to show you guys how to chop some things when we get to the actual chowder stage, just so you do have sort of some input into how to do this yourself if you want to. Most of the chops are pretty simple. You're just going for a small dice, but sometimes there are techniques that people don't know, so I want to go over them. So we're going to start by opening our quahogs, also known as clams, depending on who you talk to. Hard shell clams is another name for them. If you just say clams, most people around here are going to think that you're talking about soft shell clams or steamers. Quahogs is the general sort of accepted term for these things, the hard shell clams. But you can always call them clams. We obviously call it clam chowder on menus all over the place, and nobody seems to really mind. But my dad always told me quahogs, not clams, and so I kind of stick by that. So the first thing we're gonna do is I put some oil in my pan over here. Let's see if I can get a little angle on the pan. There we go, perfect. Just so you can see me putting stuff in there. So I put some oil in the pan and just letting that get nice and hot. It's got some olive oil. You can use absolutely anything you want. I mean, if you are particularly fond of coconut oil, I'm not going to stop you. It is a rather sweet chowder, just because of all of the alliums, the onions and the shallots that we're going to put in there, as well as for me, I'm using rice wine vinegar instead of wine. So it's going to also add a little bit more sweetness. So go ahead, use whatever oil you want. Once that's nice and hot, we're just going to put some garlic in there. I cheated today, and I'm using pre-cut garlic. The reason for that is that I'll probably put this entire jar into the recipe. It's
my
a
God.
lot of garlic. There's a bunch in the broth, and then there's just as much, if not more, depending on how heavy-handed I am in the actual chowder. And as always, you can always just change the recipe if you don't like that much garlic. So we're just going to drain that water off, put it in our oil. Hopefully you guys can hear that sizzle. That's nice. What we're trying to do here is we're just trying to get some brown on this garlic. We want that layer of flavor. Really important for soups to layer your flavors. You want to try and add something to the soup at every stage. In this case, we're browning that garlic, and in doing so, we're going to add some nice umami to it. Oh yeah, that smells good already. And the umami is going to help us get a nice sort of deep flavor along with the quahogs. Perfect. Okay, so that's just browning over here. Getting really nice. It shouldn't take too long. You want your heat pretty high for this. We are just trying to steam open some quahogs, so you shouldn't really worry too much about cooking things all the way through. You just want to get some color on them, and then for the shallots, we just want to warm them up so that they start to release their juices and their flavor. So that when we do hit it with that wine, they just explode and release that all into the broth. There's not going to be tons of liquid in this. Almost all the liquid is going to come from our quahogs. Sorry, so the garlic is getting nice and brown. Looks really good. And your garlic will brown a little bit faster if you use fresh garlic, but because I'm using the canned garlic, it's got a lot of water in there. So that water has to cook off first. So that's perfect. It's just starting to get brown. Let's see if I can show you guys. It's changed color a little bit. Probably not focusing very well. Anyways, dripping oil all over my computer. You'll know when it's brown, it'll change color. So we're going to hit it with our thyme. So our biggest time amount is going into the actual chowder itself. But right now for the opening liquid, we're just going to put a little bunch of time. These stems are very, very small, but generally when I say a sprig, I'm thinking of something like that. That's got a couple different actual pieces of thyme on it. And then one bay leaf as well. So we're going to put those right into the oil. Going to toast them up. Even just with this garlic, I don't know if you guys can hear that. Sounds almost like popcorn. That's the thyme toasting, and that's what you want. You want to hear that. That means that you are at the right temperature, and it means that your thyme is starting to cook, release all of its beautiful, beautiful flavors. And even with just this garlic and thyme, I'm already starting to get some browning on the bottom of the pan, some fond as they call it. That's really, really important. We're gonna be talking about that pretty much the whole session because every good soup has a good foundation behind it, and that's how I always remember fond is foundation fond. It gives you sort of a mnemonic device to remember. So I'm gonna put my shallots in there, and I just left the root ends on, and I cut them pretty big because we aren't gonna eat this. This is really just for flavoring. So you just want to get it in there, start getting those softened up a little bit. You really just need to heat them through. They are going to sit here and steam for quite a while with the quahogs. So you're really just trying to get them warm and get them ready for that liquid, which will let them release all their flavors. And then I couldn't find pickled cherry bombs. I don't know if you guys did. So I got banana peppers, pickled banana peppers. You really just want any kind of pickled pepper. You can't go wrong. And so we're just going to sort of take out, that's about one pepper. And that's about 2 peppers. And again, I'm probably going to go way heavy-handed on this because I like my chowder chunky. And I tend never to follow the recipe. But if you were following the recipe, you could measure them out. I'd say about a 1/4 cup of pickled pepper. And then I think it was 2 tablespoons of the brine. All right, so these shallots are starting to look good. I already have some nice color on the bottom there. This new pan is doing its job really well. So I'm going to go ahead and put those peppers right in there. Hear a nice sizzle, and then I'm just going to pour some of the brine in there as well. That's going to deglaze the pan, which is going to start getting all that brown, delicious flavor off the bottom. We don't want to cook this too long because we don't want to lose that liquid and have the fond go back to the bottom of the pan. So we're just going to stir it up, make sure it's hot. And I'm going to put my quahogs in. I'm going to start stirring them up and heating them up. So I'm going to put them all in and start getting them warm. Now, I actually got a bit more quahogs than the recipe stated. I think I ended up with 15 pounds just because I really wanted to support the guys up there who went out and dug clams or quahogs just for me. So I probably am going to have more broth than normal, and I'm going to have more meats than normal. But that's okay. You can never go wrong. More broth is usually an okay thing with this recipe. If you don't want to put it in the soup, you can just save it for something else. And if you do put it in the soup, you'll just have more soup, which is perfectly okay. All right, so we're going to try and stir these up. It can be a bit of a pain. I really like a nice thick wooden spoon for this, just so you can sort of stir from the bottom. But try your best. If you have a wider pot, it's a lot easier. But try your best to get the ones that are on top onto the bottom, and then we'll put the lid on. Sorry, we'll add the wine and then we'll put the lid on. Perfect. Got those a little stirred, and now we're just going to go for some rice wine. I'm using unsweetened white rice wine, which is still pretty sweet, but it's not as sweet as the seasoned rice wine that you would use for like sushi rice or like a sesame dressing that I really love making. And so we're just going to do a 1/4 cup of wine and a 1/4 cup of water. Again, you really just want enough to make steam so that the quahogs will cook. Most of the broth is going to come from inside. It's going to be basically just salt water. So we're just going to crank this all the way to max now. Make sure it's on. Perfect. Make sure, just check if you can. Make sure you got basically just a little bit of water or liquid along the bottom. Perfect. Just enough to make steam. Once the first one of these opens, it's going to be like a chain effect. First one's going to open, add more liquid to the mixture, and then that's going to make more steam, which is going to increase the temperature, and they're all just going to steam really, really fast once that first one cracks. We really want them to just have opened. We don't want to we really don't want to overcook them. So we're gonna wait. You can usually hear it. You can sort of see how much steam is coming out now. Once they start to open, the steam is going to go crazy. They're going to be everywhere. That temperature is going to sort of hit critical mass, and they're just going to go to town. All right, sweet. So while this is going, I am going to, this is when I'd normally be chopping all my veggies to get ready for the actual chowder. So we're going to do that right now. Like I said, most of my veggies have already been chopped, but we're still just we're gonna go for it right now. One thing that's really important you're going to want to do before you do anything is get yourself a place to put the quahogs when they're done. So something to strain them into. I'm using this big steamer pot, and I just have the lower steamer insert in there, so that I can just pour the quahogs on here. All the broth will go through the holes, and the shells will stay up here where they can get some nice airflow and cool down, so I can pick them as fast as possible. And I'm just going to put that right in my sink, so that when these are done, I can just dump the whole pot right in there, rinse this pot out, and then we'll be good to go. And I can make the chowder right in the same pot. But you can always use different pots if you want to. If you have a lot of time, you can cook the quahogs the day before and keep them in the fridge, the reserved liquid and the meats. That definitely saves a lot of time on actual chowder day. But while these are heating up, smelling really good, I'm going to show you guys how to cut some things. So the recipe has onions, shallots, fennel, bacon, potatoes, and celery. So we're going to start with the onions and shallots because those are the first thing that are going to go in the pan. So worst case scenario, you can always finish your other chops while your onions and shallots are cooking if the recipe sneaks up on you. So you always want to start with the first thing that's going to go in the pan. That way you can always turn the heat down and sort of catch back up while you chop if you are trying to work on a time restraint. So I'm just going to flip us down here to the cutting board so you can see how I'm cutting these onions. So onions are pretty much all cut the same way, and we're actually going to use this technique later with the fennel as well. But you want to hold your hand on top of them, and you want to make sure you have a nice little curve here so that you're not going to cut your fingers. And you're going to come in on a side like this with your knife, and you're just going to cut not all the way through. You don't want to go all the way through. That's why I leave the root end on. You're just going to cut almost all the way through. That way you've got a nice little slice. And what that's really doing is it's cutting this side of the onion, because we're going to go straight down on the top here, and we want to make sure that side is cut so we don't have big chunks. And then we're just going to cut not bite size. You want to be kind of small here, but we're not doing like a super small dice. We just want to get something that's maybe like a small, pinky nail size, something that's going to have some bite in our mouth while we're eating it, but it's not going to get in the way. We don't really have to chew it. The only chunk we're going to want in this chowder is going to be the quahogs. And then the onions, I'm actually going to cut even bigger, but it's the same deal. You do that same technique, cut it once in half that way, and then just straight down all the way along the onion. And then this way we'll get you some nice chunks. So that's how you cut onions, or pretty much anything that's got a sort of round shape like that. You can do that for cabbage as well, and it works really well. I'm just going to add these into my other onions. And again, I probably have way more vegetables than what is on the recipe, but that's partially because I got more quahogs and partially because I just like really, really chunky soup. If I tried to make it like this in the restaurant, they would throw me out because my food costs would be through the roof. But hey, what are you going to do? All right, so next veggies to go in are going to be the celery and the fennel, so we're going to cut them next. Celery, it can be a bit of a pain if you have a short knife. This is really long. It's longer than my knife. So to make it easier on yourself, just cut it in half. It makes it really easy. You can have way more control as you sort of cut off your sticks, and then you can just stack your sticks up. So the way I did that is I put it down where it's nice and stable, and then you just sort of roll it as you cut it. And that works really nice. And then once you have a nice pile, you can just go through here and cut nice big chunks. And again, we want to try and match every aspect of this dish. We want everything to be the same size. That way the quahogs really stand out when you find them, because they're going to be the only thing that doesn't look like everything else. The potatoes, the onions, the celery, the fennel, it's all going to look and feel the same in our mouths, but that quahog is going to pop. And everybody's going to be really excited when they get it. So I'm just going to take a peek here, see if any of these have started to open, give them a little stir. We're getting close. Add a little bit more water. The worst thing that could happen there is that your liquid evaporates before any of the quahogs open. Then you're just going to burn all that beautiful flavor that we made, and that is not a good thing. All right, so fennel. Just like an onion, you're going to leave the root end on, and then we're going to cut it like this. Fennel has a lot of layers. It's a really weird one to cut, but the root's really big, which is nice because it's going to hold it all together. This is probably the most dangerous thing to cut like this. And if you don't want to do it, that's okay. Just cut straight up and down like this, and you'll be totally fine. For me, it's just a matter of consistency, so that's why I like to do it. But we're just going to do one cut right in the middle like that, and that's just going to cut those long lobes on the side, so that we have fairly uniform cuts. And then we're just going to cut down, make ourselves a bunch of strips, and all those strips are still attached to the root, which is really nice. And then we're just going to cut the other way to get ourselves a nice chop. And fennel has a really big root, so you're going to want to stop pretty soon before the end. Otherwise, you'll get the root in there. You can eat the root; it's absolutely tasty, and it will cook down in the chowder. So you can also just put it in there if you don't really mind. And then these end pieces, you can always chop them up if you want to. You can come in here and cut them off like that, and then just cut that into sort of a stick. And then cut those sticks into dices. If you don't want to waste anything, you can also use that fennel for other broths, like a court bouillon, for cooking lobster or something like that. Or I mean, you could even put it in with the steaming liquid if you wanted to. I like the fennel more as a solid flavor here and not a background flavor. Whereas the shallots and the garlic, I want to be really, really intense in all stages. So that's why I don't use them in the broth, because I don't want that fennel flavor in the broth. I want the broth to be really showcasing like the salty values of the quahog, and then that a little bit of acidic sweetness of the peppers. If I put fennel in there, I feel like that anise flavor really sort of overtake the broth. So I do put the fennel in the chowder because I still like the flavor, but I don't want to put it in the broth. All right, cool. So that's good. So that was onions, celery, and fennel all cut up, and shallots. The last thing that's going to go in there is potatoes. And the recipe calls for peeling them, but I'm throwing another curveball, and I'm not going to peel them. I really love potato skins. This recipe is the recipe that I used to make at the restaurant, and so it has peeled potatoes, because when you're at a restaurant, generally it just looks better. The dish is white, the potatoes are white. You don't have a skin sort of popping out of the experience and sort of ruining your day. But for me at home, I want skins. They have lots of nutrients, and they taste good. I like that extra bite. So I'm gonna cut them with the skins on. And what you're gonna want to do with your potato here is, if you feel uncomfortable with a knife, you can cut a little bit off right here. And that'll give you a nice little stand, so you don't even have to hold it. And don't worry, you're not gonna waste that. You can just cut it up, put it right in there, no problem. And then once you have that nice stand, or if you don't need the stand, you can just go ahead and cut planks. And you want your planks to be about ½ an inch wide. And you're always going to have, at least I always end up with one plank that doesn't fit. So I just throw that one to the side while I'm cutting my potatoes. I'll come back to it, and I'll cut that up with all the other little planks so that they all sort of share a side. And then again, use that flat side as a nice helper for you, so you don't have to worry about things rolling around. And just cut it again into ½ inch sticks, and you can just make French fries. Or you can cut them into cubes, and they'll be our potatoes for the chowder. Those guys are going to go right into here with all the rest of my potatoes. And then for me, for bacon, I actually don't have a piece of bacon to cut, but I just cut the bacon in half, just like the celery. Makes life a lot easier. I cut it lengthwise once, and then I just cubed it up into nice little small pieces like that. That's going to crisp up really nice, and we're going to leave that in. So when you get a nice bacon piece, it's really going to make your taste buds explode. Come on, what's taking so long? We are very close over here. I don't know if it's my stove or not what, but we have not achieved open quahog yet. We will get there. All right, so don't need that anymore. Pop on up here. Oh, cool. Yeah, so when we get to the bacon stage of this cooking process, we're gonna have a really, really beautiful fond on the bottom of the pan. And I will guaranteedly try and show that to you guys. I hope that this pan isn't too deep. Ooh, I think one of them just opened. I'm hearing much more liquid boil, which is always a good sign. That means that they're starting to open, they're starting to release their liquid. And I'm starting to get some broth in there, which is what I want. Oh yeah, this potato. So this potato, that little flat piece, we're just gonna cut into sticks. And you can cut that into sticks with all of your other flat pieces. It just saves you some time. Anytime you can make a pile of vegetables and sort of cut them all at once, you're gonna save yourself some time, you're gonna save yourself some strain. You won't have to work so hard for your food. And so I really like little time-saving experiences like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my garlic ready for when we need it. So I'm just gonna get a little bowl here to put it in. Again, I'm gonna probably put way more garlic than I should, but I just really like garlic. It's an obsession, probably. All right, beautiful. Gonna put some stuff away while I have the time. Make sure. Oh yeah. That boiling is getting deeper. The is sounding deeper and deeper, which means I'm getting more and more liquid, which means at least 2 or 3 of them have started to open, which is very, very good. And what will eventually happen is we'll reach like a pressure too. The lid and the steam will I'll get too much steam, it'll try and escape, and that's how we're going to cook them the fastest. Is that pressure is going to be added onto the heat. That's really the idea behind pressure cookers. Is you have pressure plus heat, and things cook faster. You kind of force the heat in there as opposed to just sort of having an ambient temperature that slowly cooks things. All right, cool. So yeah, that's sounding really good. I don't want to open it yet because I don't want to release that pressure. I'm just going to look. If you have a clear lid, this is definitely the best time to use it. Oh, yep, I see at least one open. There's 2. Oh, yeah, we're looking really good. Okay, I'm going to let it go for just a little bit longer just because I don't want to have to shuck too many hot clams or quahogs. I always do that. So that's one thing, too. If you don't want to cook your quahogs, that is a perfectly valid way to make chowder. You're going to want a quahog knife, look something like that. And you can just open it raw. I like to come in from the front, and you just sort of you find the front lip. I should have saved on to do this with. You find the front lip. You take your knife, you put it right on that lip. You sort of groove it right in between the 2 shells, and you just sort of squeeze your hand. The hinge would be back here in your palm. You just sort of squeeze your hand, and it squeezes the knife right in. And you just sort of pop it, cut the 2 muscles, and you've got open quahogs. In that situation, you'd have a raw meat, so you'd want to make sure you put it in the chowder a bit earlier. But I like to get my meats cooked and put it in the chowder right at the end. That way I know they're not overcooked. And I also like the way that this broth turns out. If you're using raw quahogs, you tend to get, you have a raw broth, right, basically. And so again, you have to cook it. In this case, I can taste it right away before I even put it in the chowder and know if it's good and if it's how I like it. So that's why I cook mine to open them. But you can always do them raw if you want to. I find it's just a little bit more work, which is totally fine. Most of the time, more work means more flavor, but in this case, I feel like this method is the best method I've ever seen for opening quahogs. All right, let's take a peek. I think my steam is at a good level. It's nice and hot. I'm going to give them a stir and see if we can't get some to pop. Sometimes they don't open because they're in like a nice, oh yeah, see, we've got some steam coming out. That means that we have a high pressure in there. So this is perfect. It's definitely time to open it. All right, there we go. Oh yeah. I don't know if you guys can hear that or not, but you're getting a more hollow sound from the quahogs, and that means that's another way you can tell that they started to open up on the bottom. Yeah, this looks really good. Definitely a bunch of them are open. I don't want to go too much longer just because I don't want to overcook the ones that haven't opened, but I also want to make sure that they are at least cooked enough to get that nice flavor out, and that just looks so good. Oh yeah. I'm just gonna let it go for like 1 more minute, and then we'll be good to go. All right, beautiful. I know it's kind of early, but did anyone have any questions they wanted to jump in with, just on the basic stuff, chopping, etc. Just while we wait for these quahogs to open. Once they open and I dump them out, we're going to be right back into chowder zone. So we probably won't have another question session until the potatoes are cooking. But any basic stuff. Cool, no problem. That's good. That probably means that I've been pontificating a bunch and telling you guys all the fun stuff. So I'm just actually going to go clean up and put this stuff away while we wait. When I get back, we're going to dump those out. If you are familiar with my my first program I did, which was the grilling in summer, now would be a great time to perhaps crack a frosty beverage or pour yourself the remainder of that wine that you may have used for your quahogs. A lot of chefs say that if you're going to cook with the wine, you should be able to drink it. I will drink pretty much anything, so that doesn't really work so well for me. But in general, it is a good way to go. I wouldn't spend too much money on wine that you're going to cook with. Definitely make sure it's something tasty, but there are places for really bad wine, really bad acidic wine that normally would be horrible for your palate, something you'd never want to actually drink. I find to be really, really good, especially red ones, really, really good for braising meats. That extra acid really helps to add some flavor and break down those proteins. So a really bad wine, if you ever open a red that you don't like, it's absolutely horrible, you want to throw it away, put it aside, use it to braise some meat. You will feel so good about yourself because you'll have saved that wine from certain destruction, and it'll also taste really good. All right, cool. So these are done for sure. I'm gonna take this top off. We will not need that again. I'm gonna go ahead and dump them out, turn my heat off for the moment. I'm using electric, so I have to make sure that my stove cools down before I get to my next stage. And that's just like steaming beauty right there. Look at those things. You can actually, let's see if you can get it. You can't see the liquid, but there's a good amount of liquid, like a lot. It's almost covering the quahogs, which means that almost all of them are open. Make sure to get everything out of the pan. There will be quahog meats that won't be in the shells, and so you want to make sure you catch them in your pan. Check through any of your sort of leftovers. Make sure there's none in there. You do not want to waste them. All right, cool. That looks good. Let's give this a little rinse out before we get to our next stage. All right, beautiful. Nice clean pan. Get out of there. Like I was saying, nice clean pan. Put that back on that hot stove. That'll dry off all that water, which is important because we are going to jump right into an oil preparation here, or rather a fat preparation with the bacon. So we don't want any water in there. That's going to make a mess. It's going to sound bad. It's not going to be great. So let's just take a quick little peek at these quahogs. I'm going to show you guys my sink. Shh, don't tell my partner. Look at those things. They're so good. So you can see most of them are pretty open. Some of them are not, like this guy right here. We're gonna need to get at him with a knife, but that's okay. We're gonna make it happen. Hopefully don't burn ourselves. And he might open in the meantime while he's sitting over there. There's still a bunch of steam coming up from the bottom. All right, beautiful. So those guys are ready to go. We just want those to sort of cool down a little bit while we work on prepping the rest of the chowder. And then while the potatoes are cooking, we'll pick them out of their shells and get them ready to go in there. All right, so sweet. Let's get it right up here. This pan is almost dry. Perfect. So the first part of the actual chowder, and now if you were like buying your quahogs or anything like that, this is where you'd be starting, is gonna be cooking your bacon. You wanna render down that fat, start to get them a little bit crispy. And then in that fat, that's what we're gonna cook all of our veggies in. And it's just gonna make this beautiful veggie mash. Every time I cook this chowder, I often just want to like eat the vegetables before I even put the broth in. It just smells so good and it looks so good. It's going to be this beautiful brown color because of all that bacon fond that we're going to create right now. So you want it to be pretty hot. I would go like medium high. We can always turn it down, but you want that bacon to get up to temperature really fast. You don't want it to just sit there. I mean, it can sit there. It's totally fine. You can cook this slow if you want to. I tend to cook things fast. It's just in my nature, I guess. But you can turn it way down if you want. You can slow render that bacon. You can slow cook the onions and get them nice and caramelized. that is definitely an option and would probably make this even more of the best damn chowder on MV. But for me, I actually kind of like that onion flavor when it's not totally cooked out. I like it to be sort of almost a little bit crispy. I mean, it's going to be completely cooked, but it's still got that sort of raw nature to it with a little bit of cooked aspect. All right, cool. This is getting nice and hot. Beautiful. Perfect. So I got, again, way too much bacon here. Recipe called for 1/2 cup. Feel free to stick by that, but I'm doing extra quahogs and I really like bacon, so I'm going to put some tons of bacon in there. And the recipe calls for pepper bacon. If you can't find pepper bacon, you can do what I did because I couldn't also find pepper bacon, and just grind a whole bunch of pepper. And we're just going to toast the pepper in the bacon fat once it starts to render. And that's going to basically be the exact same. That's probably about 2 teaspoons of fresh ground pepper, or sorry, 2 tablespoons. It's a lot of pepper. But this is going to make probably like 6 to 8 quarts of chowder. So it's not that much pepper. If you don't like pepper, you can use less or none. It's not going to kill anything. I personally just really, really like it. So that's why it's in here. All right. So we are already getting nice brown crispy bits on the bottom because our temperature is really high. So I don't want to burn the bacon, so I'm going to turn that down just a little bit. So this bacon is at temperature, it's cooking. For the first couple minutes while it's in there, you want to pay attention to it pretty heavily. You really, really don't want it to stick. I mean, if it does stick, it's fine. We'll get it up later with the with all the veggies and the broth. But you don't really want it to stick. You want to have nice bacon chunks to eat. You don't want them just to be part of the flavor process. You want them to be part of the eating process. Once they start to cook, they'll start to release some of their fat and oil, and that will help them to not stick to the pan anymore. You can also put a little bit of oil in there if you want. I'm actually going to do it right now. It's not going to hurt. You can put it in before you put the bacon in. There definitely is a decent amount of fat in this dish and salt, but that's why it tastes so good. And again, anytime you don't like something, anytime you feel like you want to make things more healthy, just take the ingredient out. There's nothing in this chowder that's essential to its process. Even the quahogs aren't important. You could just use salt water and all these vegetables, and you're still going to have a really, really delicious soup. So don't worry about changing the recipe. Just make sure you make it the way you like it. It's a little too hot. I'm going to turn that down, take it off the heat for a second. And oh yeah, that fond's getting really nice. So once this bacon renders a little bit more, I'm going to show you that fond before I put the garlic in there to brown it. Oh yeah. So bacon's a great way to get a fond. In general, sugar is what's going to do it. It's the Maillard reaction, which is the caramelization of sugar into basically burnt carbon. But it's the tastiest burnt carbon you're ever going to find. So what we're doing with bacon, or most meats, will leave that on the bottom. If you ever like seared a piece of meat, you'll often have something sort of left behind. And a lot of recipes with like a sauce will use like a wine or something acidic to deglaze the pan. In this case, we're actually going to use raw veggies to deglaze the pan. Sort of a soft deglaze. As the veggies start to release their water, that water is going to mix with the carbon. The sugar is dissolved. Water, pretty much everything dissolves in water. So those caramelized sugars are going to dissolve back into the water. They're going to make sort of a little slurry. That's going to, as we cook the vegetables, the water is going to evaporate, and that slurry is going to attach itself to the vegetables and infuse them with all that beautiful flavor. And that's why this is going to taste so good, because the veggies themselves are going to be good. The broth is going to be good. The meat is going to be good. Every individual part we've worked on and purposely made taste like something, so that when we put it all together, the whole experience is just amazing. All right, beautiful. So let's take a quick peek at this. I'm actually going to cook the bacon a little more, I think, before I put the garlic in there, but hopefully you can just see this beautiful fond. See how brown that is on the bottom there? And that's just from a couple minutes of cooking bacon. I guarantee you this was a new pan. It was super, super shiny when we first started. So that's what you're looking for. That's the fond. That is what it's going to make these veggies the best veggies you've ever had in your whole life. I'm actually going to turn this temperature back up again, because now I have some grease in there. I'll check my bacon. I don't have to worry too much about it sticking. Beautiful. actually going to put a little bit more fat in there just because I don't want my garlic to stick. And because, again, it's flavor. Fat is flavor. And you don't have to do that part if you don't want to. Beautiful. Now this bacon is going to keep cooking as I cook the garlic and the thyme. So I'm not too worried about getting it super, super crispy right now. I just want it to be rendered out a decent amount. We probably got another like 3 or 4, maybe 5 minutes before we put any whole veggies in there. I would take some fennel. It's really good. And so that, again, that bacon will have some time to sort of finish its cooking process. So let's see. I haven't done this in a while. Pretty sure it's garlic then thyme. Yep, it is. So garlic in there. Beautiful. Oh man, garlic and onions are both aromatics, and anytime you add them to a dish, it just changes the whole floral sense of the game. So I'm just gonna stir that up with the bacon. Bacon and garlic cooking together, man, it's amazing. Whew. Just that little bit of water that's in with the garlic has already started to make my fond come up off the pan, but it's not going anywhere. It's gonna take a lot of liquid to really get that off, and that's how you know you have a good fond. It's that nice, rich brown color without being burnt. You really want to have proper temperature control, because if you burn your fond, you might as well start over because it's just gonna permeate the whole dish. We're gonna put the pepper in now too. Almost forgot that. Gonna toast that in the oil as well. That'll help to release all of its glorious, glorious chemicals. And again, I use fresh ground pepper, about 2 tablespoons. You can use less, you can use more. If you use pre-ground pepper, probably use less. Pre-ground pepper tends to be really, really fine, and so that flavor is gonna permeate the dish more. And it's actually gonna change the color of the broth. It's gonna be a lot darker. Whereas whole ground pepper or fresh ground pepper, you're gonna get actual chunks that are gonna hold up, and you might like sort of get stuck in your teeth, which is a really great experience for me. I love when I chew into a piece of peppercorn. And while the flavor will be more intense, it won't be so overwhelming as like powdered pepper is. So I tend to use a lot more when I'm using fresh ground, even though generally fresh herbs are stronger. All right, yeah, this is looking really good. My pepper and my garlic are now starting to add to the fond. They're changing it. They've added a lot more sugar, where before we just had mostly protein. So the fond is getting sticky, and that's great. That's a good sign. That means when I put this water in here, it's going to dissolve like that. It's going to make my veggies, and by water I mean the raw vegetables. Raw vegetables have so much water in them, so you can almost treat them like a liquid in a dish. Oh yeah, so good. Actually, let's get another look there. See what it looks like. So see, it's gotten a lot darker, if you guys can remember. And I can't actually show you what the garlic and pepper looks like, but it is a beautiful thing. And it just smells so good. So that's ready to go. So we're gonna go for onions and shallots. Onions and shallots are gonna be our first thing. And we're not gonna cook these too much before we put the fennel and celery in there. We really just wanna get them warm through so they start to cook. They are a really important flavor element, which is why we're putting them in first. All the vegetables are going to basically be completely cooked when we're done, so we don't really have to worry about which one's going to cook faster. It's just that we want the onion flavor to be the first thing that bacon fat sees, and then the fennel and celery is going to come in after those flavors have sort of set up home in the fat molecules. Oh yeah. All right, we're going to turn this down. Now that we got our veggies in there, we're really going to go to a slow burn here. We're not really trying to make any more color. We're just trying to basically steam the veggies. And I don't know if you've noticed or not, but I haven't put any salt in there, and I'm not going to. That broth from the Quahogs is super salty. So we're not going to salt this dish until everything's in there. The potatoes have had a chance to cook, and we've had a chance to taste it, because we don't know how salty these Quahogs were. Could be a particularly hot day, so the water was maybe more salty. So we're gonna check it out before we start seasoning anything. The only seasoning here you want is gonna be herbs. Oh, look at me, I'm a dummy. I forgot my time. It's okay. You can always fix things. Just put it in. So I, of course, should have put that in there with the garlic and the pepper, but I forgot. But that's okay. We're still early enough in the process. That's gonna infuse everything really, really well. And you just throw them in there whole. When we're done with this, we'll pick the stems out before we serve it. Or if you have friends like mine, you can just leave them in there, because it's really fun to just like eat the stem it gets nice and soft and delicious. It's actually really, really tasty. All right, this is looking really good. You can start to scrape the bottom now and see if that fond is going to come off. These onions are definitely starting to release some of their liquid, but the real winner is going to be the celery and the fennel. Those guys are just absolutely packed with water. Oh yeah. And I a little bit. That's really nice. All right, cool. So we're just gonna let that go for a little bit, cook up. I'm going to start evacuating my quahogs here so that I can get the broth. Just put them in another bowl. If you can, while you're doing it, sort of separate the ones that are going to be easy, that are completely open. Maybe you just toss out the ones that don't have any meats in them, and then put the ones that you know you're going to need to take a knife to over to the side so that you can either ignore them if you don't feel like doing them, or so you can do them, you know, do them first if you happen to be crunched for time. Most of these are open. I think we did pretty much perfect. You usually can tell you did a good job when about a third of them are unopened or barely opened, rather. That means you didn't overcook them, and you don't want to overcook them. That is just a very sad experience when you have a really chewy quahog in this beautiful broth that we made. We don't want that broth to go to waste. We want people to love and enjoy it, and the best way to have them love and enjoy it is to make everything that's in that broth absolutely perfect. And overcooked quahogs are a sad thing indeed. Oh yeah. Okay, we're just gonna take another look. Let's see if I can actually get you guys to see the chunks. Or maybe if I take them out. There we go. So there's the chunks. They're just starting to turn translucent. They're everything's nice and warm. So we're gonna go ahead and put our next veggies in there. The fennel and the celery. I'm just gonna let those cook. So I took all the quahogs out, got them ready to pick, and I just got this beautiful looking broth here. Look at it, it's so good. Oh my God. Woo! That's tasty. Salty, tastes like quahogs. I can taste a little bit of the thyme, a little bit of that vinegary aftertaste. It's perfect. It's gonna make such good chowder. All right, so stir up the fennel and the celery. Make sure you scrape down your sides of your pot. The sides can, if you're using flame specifically, the sides can get a lot hotter than you'd think, and you don't want any of those vegetables to get burnt. And then if you're using electric like me, the sides just don't get hot at all, and so you want those veggies to actually get cooked. So make sure you scrape down your sides. And now that you put in that celery and fennel, the bottom should be nice and wet. Not wet so much as you should notice the fond start to dissolve. And so go ahead and scrape it. That's why I like a wooden spoon like this with a flat tip, because it lets me scrape the bottom. Some would call this a spatula, but it's probably one of my favorite tools in my entire kitchen. I can even flip eggs on with it. So yeah, start to scrape your bottom, get all of that fond off. You will see your vegetables start to turn a beautiful brown. That fond sort of starts to coat them with its flavor. Everything's got to be smelling really good. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. So this is the stage where I look at this and go, I should just eat that as it is. And maybe I will. Maybe today's the day. Once it starts to cook. Everything's not fully cooked, so it's going to be a little crunchy, but it's going to be good, I promise. It is a very, very flavorful dish. All right, so my broth is good, my veggies are good. Actually, turn that back up. I turned it down too much. Cooking with electric is a challenge. If you've never done it before, temperature control is really, really essential. We're actually going to jump into a temperature control experience next month, but I will leave it at that so that I don't give away anything else. But I am going to challenge myself because I'm going to be doing it on an electric. So fingers crossed. I got a month to plan though, so it's fine. All right, cool. Yeah, so you can start to hear it again, which is good. If you can't hear the veggies cooking, then they're not cooking. They're just sort of sitting there. So that's a good way to sort of tell. If you were chopping vegetables right now, which is what I'd usually be doing if I was cooking this in the kitchen, I'd be chopping my potatoes probably at this point. You know, I could have my back to the stove and still be hearing that sizzle and knowing when it's starting to get too hot when I have to come over and stir it. Oh yeah, sorry, I left my spoon in there. So again, you're just trying to heat these things up. You're trying to let them get a little bit soft and prepared for the broth so that they'll release all their flavor. Oh man, it smells so good. And the bottom of my pan is completely clean. I'm actually gonna show you that real quick. Look at that, completely clean. All that fond is now in my vegetables. It is amazing. I really love this new pan. Best Christmas present ever. All right, cool. Ooh, all right, so yeah, so let's get these guys over here. Why not? We might as well start picking some quahogs now. There's no reason to wait. So you're gonna want to, I don't know if you noticed, I had a whole bunch of bowls that I had my mise en place in. So you're gonna want to get another bowl. You're gonna put your meats in here. And if you take a quick peek again, that's my quahogs. They all look pretty good. I got the ones over here that are not open. I'm gonna save those to last so that they have a chance to cool down. It's gonna hurt a lot if I try and open one of those and the hot broth just like spills over my hands. If you have gloves, now would be the time to put them on. I don't, so I'm just gonna pray. Also, my hands are basically asbestos, so I shouldn't have to worry too much about getting burned. But this actually is starting to sound pretty good. I might just go to the next stage. Now we're gonna crack some quahogs first. Cool. So let's go for some quahogs. So most of them are gonna be pretty easy. If they're already open, I'm just gonna tilt it down a little bit so you can sort of see what I'm doing here. If they're already open like that, you really just gotta pull them out. And one really important thing to do when you pull them out is you wanna try and pull and leave behind, I just squirted all over my computer, leave behind that little muscle. It's tough. If you don't mind tough, you can dig it out with your finger and put it right in the chowder. That's the abductor muscle. It is not very tasty. I mean, that's not wrong. That's not true. It's very tasty. It tastes like quahogs. It's delicious, but it's very tough. You got to chew it. If you don't mind that, put it in there. It's more meat. Your belly's gonna thank you for it. But if you want the tenderest chowder, you're gonna want to pick that out. And there's actually another one on the other side right here. And if you want to go for it, you can just pull that one right out, and they'll leave a little hole on each side there. So there's another hole right there where it would be. And then you're gonna have nothing tough in your chowder. I tend to leave one of them just because it's easier and faster. But do whatever you feel comfortable with, including leaving them both. They are food. They're just tough. Funnily enough, another favorite shellfish of mine, scallops, also have an abductor muscle. But their abductor muscle is the only thing you eat. It's that nice little white circle you get that's a scallop. That's just the abductor muscle. You throw away pretty much the rest of it. Whereas with a quahog, all we eat is the belly and the body. With a scallop, all you eat is the muscle. Just a very interesting experience. And it's funny too, because scallops actually locomote. They move around the ocean. So it's weird that the muscle they use to move is actually the most tender. So that's a really good one. That's how you can tell it's cooked well, when it's not just like a small, like charred husk. It's nice and juicy still, but it's still attached to the shell. That's how you can tell that it's perfectly cooked. All right, this is looking really, really good. Starting to get super cooked and soft. Now's the time I'm actually going to try a little spoonful because I told myself I would. Oh my gosh, it looks so good. So you can see it's just all those beautiful things. The celery. It's still a little crunchy. But everything tastes really good. And again, there's no salt in there. So when you taste it, you're not going to feel like super excited because it's not going to be super salty. But go with it. All right, so those are ready. I'm gonna put my potatoes in there now. And you want to put the potatoes in and cook them for a little bit before you put the broth in. That way, the first thing that those potatoes touch is going to be that beautiful, flavorful sort of vegetable slurry we made. And you're going to suck all that fat up right into them. any salt that is in there from the bacon is going to get sucked right into them. And that way later, when we go to eat them, they're gonna taste like something. They're not just gonna be little starchy cubes in our broth. They're gonna have that same beautiful flavor compound that we've been working on with everything else. So stir it up. You don't want to cook it for too long. You don't want your potatoes. Your potatoes are super starchy. They're gonna suck up all that liquid that's in there, and they will start to stick to the bottom of the pan. So you don't want to cook them for too long. You really just want to heat them up, give them a chance to sort of get friendly with all those spices and flavors we have in there. And then we're gonna put the broth in there and let everything cook. All right, that looks so good. Just a couple seconds. I'm gonna pick a couple more quahogs while we do that. So this one, again, very simple. They're just sort of hanging there. You just want to pull off, and you'll leave behind the little muscle right there. And that's all you got to do. If they're open like a little bit like that, you can usually get your fingers in there and pull them apart. That's how. Those are the ones that are cooked the best. You see when they're attached to both. Again, if you don't want them, you can just pull the abductor muscles right off. All right. That's starting to make noise at me, which means it is ready to go. I'm going to stir it up one more time. And then I'm going to put the broth in. And you can strain this broth if you want to. You can strain it through cheesecloth. You can strain it through a fine strainer so you don't get any sand in there. I just tend to pour it most of the way and just leave a little bit of liquid in the bottom. That's pretty much where all of your shells, fragments, and stuff are going to go, because that has been just sort of sitting there and settling. But most of the time, you're not going to really have a lot of shell fragments. So I can already tell that I put too much veggies in here. And so I'm going to add a little bit more water, and I'll probably end up having to add some salt later. But my broth is just coming to the top of where my vegetables are. So that tells me that I'm either going to have a very chunky chowder, which is totally fine, or that I just put too much veggies in there, which is so classic for the way I cook. I really do tend to always over prep. So I'm just going to put some more water in there. I'll take a quick taste just to check the salt level. The broth should still be hot at this point. Most of the veggies should be cooked, so you shouldn't have to worry too much about the flavor really changing. All right, so that's pretty salty, like really salty actually. So I can probably add some water and not have to worry about salt later. But we're gonna see what the potatoes do. I'm just gonna. You want it so that when the whole soup is sort of at rest, you can't really see the vegetables. There's enough liquid in there that they're covering the vegetables. So I'm gonna put that some more water in there. I probably put another quart and a half maybe of water along those lines. So yeah, so perfect. So now the soup is at rest. All the chunky bits are at the bottom, and all I can see on the top is floating thyme, a beautiful oil slick. So that's perfect. That's where I want it to be. Because you do want it to be chunky. You are going to add some cream to this later, and you don't want to lose everything, but you don't want to be too chunky. I mean, that's not true. If you like it chunky, keep it chunky. But I don't like it too chunky. I like to have a little bit of broth in there. You know, something to dip my biscuits in if you decide to make those, or just some bread, whatever you want to. So we're just gonna let that come to a simmer. We're actually gonna turn it up a little bit. Once it gets to a simmer, we're gonna turn it way down. We're just gonna wait till the potatoes are almost completely cooked. We don't want them completely cooked because that soup is gonna sit for a bit before we add the cream. And so it is. Oh yeah. So we just want to make sure that they get most of the way done. Usually, again, if I was cooking this in the restaurant, I'd be quick cooling this with like an ice rod and making it cold as fast as possible. And then it would go in the fridge. So those potatoes would get heated back up again. So I don't really want to cook them all the way. But if you're going to eat it right away, like literally as soon as you're done, put some cream in there and call it a day, you can cook the potatoes all the way. So again, I'm just picking these quahogs. I'm trying to leave some of the abductor muscles just because I like them. I like a little bit extra bite, but you can do whatever you feel comfortable with. You can pick them clean, or you can put none of the muscles in there. And it's a pretty fast process. Basically just the ones that are open are pretty easy. You just want to find the loose bit and then just pull it off real gentle so that you leave the muscle behind. Whoops. The fun part is going to be when we get to the ones that are not open. And you're going to get to see my amazing techniques for opening quahogs. Oh yeah, these are so nice. Beautiful. And the ones that aren't open are actually going to be some of the better ones because they're the ones that aren't cooked as much. It's pretty much impossible unless you're doing a really, really small batch of Quahogs to cook them all perfectly. It just isn't going to work. The pan's going to have different temperature zones. They're going to be different temperatures when they go in there. They're going to have different ideas on what their health is like, and some are going to open faster than others. It's almost impossible unless you're doing like little necks in a small pan to get everybody to open at the same time. So you're going to have some that are overcooked, and the ones that are undercooked is great because they're going to go into a hot broth and they will finish cooking in no time. I mean, realistically, you don't need to cook Quahogs at all. You can eat them raw, so we're not too worried about undercooked. Beautiful. I'm getting through most of my easy ones here. Looking really good. And all the chunks that were part of this, the peppers and the shallots, you can eat them if you want. You can put them in a stir fry. They tend to be a little bit gritty, but if you have really clean Quahogs, or you just don't mind, you don't want to waste them, by all means, put them in like a stir fry or something like that, or just put them back in the chowder. I mean, I'm not going to stop you. I love any way to save money, to save save sort of the demand and keep things fresh. I'm all for it. All right, cool. So I've done with all my easy ones, which means it's time to get into hard zone. So I got my Quahog knife here, and you could also just put these back in a hot pan with a little bit of the broth to steam them open. Like if you were doing this the day before, for instance, and you weren't sort of waiting, you could use some of that broth and just steam them open. But then you run the risk of overcooking them again, and I just don't like to do that. So we're going to open them up. I'm actually going to bring you guys a little closer because you're going to want to be close for this. All right, so you got a Quahog. I personally like to hold it with the short end. See, there's a short end and the long end, long, short. The short end away from me. I take the Quahog knife, I put it right in the front, right in there. And this is going to be much easier. This is a great way to practice too if you've never opened them before. It's going to be a lot easier because they're mostly cooked. But you want to put it right in that little groove of the front lip. You're going to come in here with your hand. Remember, the hinge is back in your palm. And you're just going to push in, right? So that just went right in there, nice and easy. And then there's two muscles here. Those are the abductor muscles we were talking about. That's what you're going to cut. That's what's keeping this closed. So you're going to go try and get that tip of the knife right there in the shell where the muscle is. And you're just going to scrape it. And what that's going to do is it's going to cut it. And so that one's cut. Now I need to cut this one. So you're going to take your knife out most of the way. And you're going to try and go after that point, and you're going to scrape the top again. And be careful. Don't get yourself in the palm. If you have a sharp knife, I've done that a bunch of times. It's no fun. So we got it open most of the way. Should be able to pull it open now. And we've got a nice, look at that. Look at how juicy he is. And that's because he is perfectly cooked. He's not overcooked. He didn't even open, which means that that he didn't lose any of his juices. He stayed nice and moist. So we're just going to keep doing that with all these. My broth is almost at a simmer, which is great. Turn it up a little more. Oh, yeah. And I like to stir it pretty vigorously. I want the thyme on the stems to come off. I like personally having lots of pieces of thyme. Looks really pretty in the bowl. Once you add the cream, it sort of floats in there. It's really nice. All right, so again, short end, long end. I'm gonna go right in the front. Whoop, see, there's my hot liquor. Look at all that broth. Beautiful. So he didn't really need anything. He just needed somebody to cut that little bit of that little membrane that that holds the lips together, and he popped right open. So that was an easy one. And that is literally the most perfectly cooked Quahog you could ever experience. Every part of it is tender. Even the muscles, I bet, are pretty tender. And that broth wasn't too hot, which is good. Just had time to cool. So again, short end away from you. You're just going after those muscles. If you don't feel comfortable scraping the top, you can just go straight back and like saw. You can do a little sawing motion. You're going to get through there eventually. But again, just be careful of your palm. You are cutting toward yourself here, which you're never supposed to do, but it's a very efficient way of getting these out. Oh man, that one was so juicy. Just get everything out of there that you can. Oops. We're gonna keep going. All right, so again, we're just gonna keep doing this same process. You guys can keep watching there as I mess around, try out some different techniques. Do it along with me if you need to. I'm gonna take these Quahog shells out to my chickens, and they are gonna love it. I'm gonna crack them up with a hammer. They're gonna peck those shells, make my eggs. super nice and strong with all that calcium. So everybody gets a treat from this. We get chowder and chickens get delicious eggs, which is then a treat for us later. It's a win-win-win-win-win. All right, yeah, that one's perfect. Again, short side away from you is the way I like to do it. There are many different ways to open quahogs, but that's how I like to do it. Beautiful. Just gonna stir this one more time. It's really, really close to boiling. And what will happen, especially when it's chunky like this, is the chunks will settle on the bottom. You do not want them to burn. Again, that will ruin our whole flavor layering experience we've been going through. It's getting nice and hot, so this is actually a really good time to check your salt. Your potatoes have had a chance to absorb a little bit of it. So just go ahead and get some broth right off the top. I like to sort of push the broth around so I don't get any oil slick. And then just come in with a sort of like a backhanded swoop with your, like a backhanded swoop with your spoon. That way you won't get any of the thyme in there. It looks really good. So I could use a little more salt. I did put quite a bit of water in there, so that's totally to be expected. I'm not worried about it in the least. The flavor is spot on, though. It just tastes so good. It's super thymy, super quahoggy. Just like a thyme plant decided to go to the beach and just planted himself right in the dunes. Open these guys up. Oh yeah, beautiful. So let's check out the chat. Does anybody have any questions? How do you know that an unopened quahog is good? That is a good question. I know that these unopened quahogs are good because I bought them yesterday. And I know that there were a bunch of good quahogs that were opened with them. So in general, an unopened quahog is, in this situation, is going to be good. If I was, the rule that an unopened shellfish shouldn't be in tends to come from people who are getting their shellfish shipped to them. Those are shellfish that have died, and sort of in their death throe, they have clamped themselves shut, and they will appear to be alive shellfish until you try and eat them, and then they will get you very, very sick. So for me, I know that these are good because I got them all yesterday, and there's like such a low chance that any quahogs would have died and rotted at that point. But yeah, if you're getting your quahogs from an outside supplier that is not as local as these, there's definitely a chance that an unopened quahog would be bad. And in that situation, if you feel like it's bad, the best way to test is just get a separate bowl, try and open it up, and see what it smells like. Shellfish is not shy about telling you when it's bad. It will smell horrible. You'll want to wash your hands. You'll want to throw the bowl away. Do all those things, and then just move on to your next shell, because yeah, bad shellfish is very dangerous. But these I know are good because they're just so fresh. There's such a small chance that any of these could have gone bad or would have been picked out, harvested dead. The guy that I got them from is a good dude, a good friend, and so he would have checked for me as well when they came in. It's pretty easy to tell when one's dead. You kind of throw it at a cutting board when they're raw, and if it's dead, it'll make a hollow sound or crack open, and there'll be like muck inside. So there's a lot of good ways to check it out before you cook them. But in this case, I just went on faith in my supplier and the fact that I know these came fresh to me yesterday. So it's looking really good. Beautiful. All right. So now what we're going to do is just cut up our quahog meats rather, and then we're going to be good. Hopefully by the time we're done with this, the potatoes will be almost entirely done. I'm actually going to pull one out and just see how we're doing. Still a little crunchy. Oh, but it's good. It absorbs some of that salt. Tastes really good. Big fan. All right, sweet. So quahogs. They're really cool. They've got a little foot right here. Kind of looks like a man of war. They got their belly and their guts, and then there's the mantle. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to lay it down on the cutting board, and we're going to cut it into fours. So we're going to cut it once, right through the foot, and then we're going to flip it sideways, and we're going to cut the belly and the guts in half. And then what's going to happen is the mantle is going to fall off as we stir it in, It's going to cook fully and it's going to shrink up a little bit. So I'm not too worried about like cutting that off or anything like that. So just to show you again, we're going to do this a bunch of times. I'm going to lay it out. This one's a really nice one. You got sort of the foot away from you with the mantle hanging. You're just going to cut it in half once. You're going to flip it this way. You're going to cut the belly in half, and that's good. Really important step here. If you have left your abductor muscles on, when you're having it here, you're going to want to make sure you cut those muscles in half. That cut that you're doing across the belly, you want to line it up right with the abductor muscles so that you cut them in half. That way, even though they're not super tender, you'll at least be cutting them smaller so that the fibers will be easier to digest and to chew on. It's a good thing you can do with a really cheap piece of steak as well. If you find the grain and then you cut against the grain, you cut those fibers that make the steak really really tough. You cut the fibers smaller, and then when they're smaller, they're easier to chew. And then you can take something like a flank steak, for instance, that is just like a whole bunch of long, stringy fibers, and you can make it taste and feel like a really expensive cut of meat. So again, we're just quartering these. Take your time. I'm going to go pretty fast just because I've done this a bunch of times, but make sure you get the foot cut in half, and then if you have the abductor muscles, make sure you cut those in half as well. Those are basically your two goals here, is to cut the foot in half and to cut the abductor muscles in half. Those are your two most solid pieces, and so we want to make sure that they are nice and tender. Got a little shell fragment in there. I think that was actually, might have been a small fish. I have no idea, but we're not putting it in the chowder. Have to go back and check. Maybe it was a pearl. I'll be rich. And if you have a grinder, you can put them in there too. I feel like grinders are generally sort of a thing of an era where quahogs weren't treated properly. They weren't cooked properly. They were just sort of cooked till open. And we are trying our hardest today to cook them till done instead of cooked till open. And so that's why these are nice and soft and tender. We don't need to grind them up because we want people to have a whole big chunk of quahog that they have to chew through, and and they're going to chew through it in a way that is pleasurable. They're not going to be fighting it. They're just going to be tasting it and experiencing it. And so by cooking them properly, we are allowing whoever gets the chance to eat this to have an even more intimate experience with the quahogs and our island. So don't use a grinder unless you really, really don't like quahogs as a meat and you really just like the flavor. If that's the case, use that grinder. Get that flavor infused in there, and do you, because that's all you should be doing. All right, almost done. Man, they smell so good. And you can do this with any shellfish. It doesn't have to be quahogs. You could use oysters. You could use scallops if you want to. The bellies on scallops are actually pretty tasty. Nobody eats them just because they're kind of a pain to deal with. But you could totally steam some scallops open like this. They're not going to have as much broth, so you're going to definitely want to try and supplement that. But like oysters for sure are going to have tons of broth. Let's see, you could use cockles, although that broth would be like a super dark black color almost. Blood clams is what cockles are often sometimes called. They're fun. They have a really red flesh. All right, cool. We got some more broth. I'll put that in there. Beautiful. So there's all of our quahog meats. It doesn't look like a lot, but I promise that is plenty. That's gonna be enough for each bowl to have about 2 or so quahogs in it, which is all you ever need. That reminder that there are quahogs in this chowder is what you're usually looking for when you're trying to make a really good chowder. So this is looking really good. Turn it down a little bit. Looking good, smelling good. My potatoes are almost cooked, so I'm probably gonna go ahead and do the salting. Still could use a little more. Beautiful. Let me dispose of these shells, this mountain of shells. All right, guys, now is the perfect time for questions. Let's see if we got any more. Yeah. Bay leaves, yes. Sorry, I did put the bay leaves in. They were in with my thyme both times. I didn't mention them. Thank you for bringing it up. The bay leaves go into the recipe at the same time as the thyme, and I just had the leaves in with the thyme stems when I put them in. You want to toast them just like the thyme. It helps for their oils to sort of come out. Serving size, yeah, awesome. So that's kind of up to you. Classically, I would do a 4-ounce serving if I was like serving it in a restaurant. So what that would be is a 4-ounce ladle of the chowder base. This is what we call the chowder base. So I do a 4-ounce ladle of the chowder base, and I'd put anywhere from 2 to 4 tablespoons of cream in, depending on how decadent I want it to be. And then you want to salt it a little bit more at that point too. But generally about 4 ounces is perfect. Oh, how many servings? This should make 8 quarts, 6 to 8 quarts, depending. I think this one is probably a really big batch, so we're probably looking at closer to like 10 quarts. And then every quart is going to be, what's the math on that? 64 ounces. Is that right? Is that a gallon? That's a gallon, isn't it? 16 ounces. I'm sure Virginia has a computer. I want to do the math. 8 ounces, 16 ounces, 32 ounces is a quart. So you're going to have, every quart is going to give you 8 servings-ish. Honestly, 4-ounce serving is probably too little for me. I'd do an 8-ounce serving because if you're cooking, especially if you're eating it for dinner, I want more chowder. It's not an appetizer, it's a dinner. So an 8-ounce serving probably makes more sense. So each quart's going to give you 4 servings, and the whole recipe is going to give you up to 16 servings, depending on how much you eat. And you can make it more if you want to. Just add more salt and water. Those flavor profiles we've been working on this whole time are going to keep strong through the dish, no matter how much water you put in there. I mean, you don't want to put too much, but in general, because we worked so hard on creating really good flavor, more salt, more water are just going to sort of water them down, but they're still going to be strong. So you can stretch the soup if you want to, or you can, like I said, just not add any water and maybe not use all your broth and make a really super chunky chowder, and you're going to get a lot less in that situation. But everything's going to be really, really intense. So, but yeah, that's how much it should make. Is about 6 to 8 quarts. Cool, man. I'm down with that. So I'm thinking like 8 ounces for like with your biscuits, maybe like or a piece of bread or something like that. But yeah, no, go to town. Eat as much as you want. I'm pretty bad. I never measure my portions at all. There's a big problem when I was in the kitchen. Actually, people were always telling me I put too much on the plate. But yeah, you can go up to pretty much whatever you like. For me, yeah, before the lobster, there we go. For me, like this is the bowl I use. I should probably measure it, but I fill that right up to the brim. Nice little like chunky little pile, and then like some chowder biscuits around the edge. So that's like what I'm thinking when I think a portion, but that's probably not 8 ounces. That's probably closer to 12. You can't go wrong, basically. But yeah, cook the lobster with those leftover fennel chunks. Make a nice court bouillon for your lobster. You're gonna be in good life. All right, I think we're about done here. Potatoes are falling apart in my mouth. They're really starchy. Wow. I can't remember what brand that was. Let's try that one more time. Okay. Hot. Okay. So we're going to salt it at this point because I know I added water in there and I already tasted the broth. And I can taste my potatoes aren't super salty, which means there wasn't enough salt in the broth to sort of make them ultra seasoned. So I'm going to add some more salt now. We're going to go back at the broth, give it a taste before we thicken it up. And you don't have to thicken this up. I like to thicken it with cornstarch because it emulsifies the oil and all the broth into like one thing. But you can use less cornstarch. You can use no cornstarch and just eat it the way it is. I just like it when it's a little bit thicker. It sort of coats in your mouth. And you don't have to use cornstarch. You could you take some of the potatoes out, cook them in like a little bag, like a little cheesecloth bag. Take them out, mash them up, put them back in. That would also thicken it really well. There's a lot of different things you can do here for thickening. But cornstarch is what I use just because it's easy. was available in the kitchen, and it made for a really consistent product. So, oh, that's good. Salt is perfect. We can always add more salt later when we put the cream in, because the cream is also going to take away from some of that salt. But everything tastes really good. I can taste the oil. I can taste the clams. I can taste the thyme a lot, which is great. I can taste those pickled peppers. And when I do heat this up to serve it, I'm going to put a little bit more of that that pickled pepper juice in there. Like on the line in the kitchen, we'd have a little bottle of the pickled brine, and we just squeeze a little bit in right at the end. Makes it really, really good. All right, so the potatoes are almost done. So we're going to go ahead and put our quahogs in the pot. Perfect. Clean up a little bit, and we're just going to stir that. Turn the heat way up. We're going to whisk in our slurry here. Just going to make it nice and thick, make everything cohesive. I've got a whisk somewhere in here. There it is. And we're going to go for about a quarter cup of cornstarch. But again, you don't need a lot. You're really just trying to get that water molecule to stick to the fat molecule, so that you don't have a weird oil slick at the front. Depending on how much bacon you put in and oil, you might not have any oil slick, so you might not even want to do this. But that's always up to you. So we're just adding a little water to the cornstarch, make a little slurry. I feel like slurry, the really definition of the slurry is, that it's liquid, and then if you let it sit, it like gets solid. Cornstarch is a really fun non-Newtonian liquid if you put it in the right amounts. And so that's how you know it's a good slurry. That looks good to me. And the cornstarch won't activate unless it boils. That's the starches start to cook. They start to connect to each other and form chains. And so that's why we're turning the heat all the way up just for a bit. We don't really want to cook anything that's in that soup anymore. We just want to make sure that the cornstarch, when it hits that water, immediately does its job. And so I got a nice boil going right now. I'm just going to start stirring. I'm just going to drizzle in my cornstarch. You should see the color change. You should see that oil slick on top disappear as it gets emulsified into the chowder. And it really doesn't thicken it that much. It really is more so that you have that oil slick emulsified in so that everything tastes the same. You don't want to have an oil slick on the top of your soup unless you're doing some sort of like ramen, in which case that's like kind of part of the experience. But for this, we want everything to be nice and homogenized and taste good. So every single spoonful is the exact same as the one before. And the exciting part is sort of exploring all the different chunks that we added in there. Yeah, so that looks perfect. So let's see if I can, there's just a little bit of, you're not gonna be able to see it, oh well. There's just a little bit of oil slick. I actually might put a little bit more in there just because it's still a bit oily. And because I like it thick. But do it how you like it. And it's just a little bit of cornstarch mixed with water. All right, beautiful. So last step we have here is just making the finished product. So I'm going to turn this way down. I'm actually going to turn it off. That is just done. That's our chowder base. So it's just a base. You can eat it like that. Don't get me wrong. It's really, really good like that, actually. But to finish it off, we're going to add a little bit of cream. And we're going to add a little bit of salt. Let me get the cream. Where'd you go? There it is. And we're going to get a little sauce pot here. All right, beautiful. So got a little sauce pot there. And this is what I do is like if I made this ahead of time and I was just cooking it for myself, maybe. I got my 4-ounce ladle. I think it's actually 6-ounce ladle. 6-ounce ladle. So we just imagine that would be cold, you know, coming out of the fridge or whatever. So you got your 6-ounce ladle. You're just going to take about 6 ounces. Make sure it's kind of chunky. A little bit of the broth too. So you got something like that. See if you can even see that. And we're going to heat that up. Now, again, it's already hot, so we don't really have to worry too much about that part of the process. But we're just going to take our spoon that I've been using to taste things and use that as our spoon. At this point, you can take your time stems out. They've cooked a lot. You can see that there's really not much time left on them, which is perfect. That means all the time is in the chowder, which is where I want it to be. And you're going to find there's quite a lot of time stems in there. It's kind of one of my favorite parts of the process is picking them out. So we're going to get this nice and hot, assuming again that we're reheating it. And then once it starts to get hot, we're going to put a little bit of cream in there. And again, you can change the cream. I got too big of hands. I can't open this cream. Yes, great success. We're going to put a little bit of cream in there. Turn you down a little bit. It's too much. A little bit of cream, just enough. Maybe that was probably like 2 tablespoons. Just enough to change the color. So we get a really nice, beautiful chowder color. You see that, or is it too steamy? I think it's just because it's white. Really nice chowder color. And then we put some cream in there. So we're going to put a little more salt in there because I know that cream is going to take a lot of the salt away. Really, really basic cream. It doesn't have a lot of flavor. It just has a lot of fat, which is goes really good with things that are flavored. We're just going to try that broth. Oh, so good. Oh my God. Whew. Take my favorite bowl there that I was telling you guys about earlier. We're just going to pour this right over there. I poured it over the spoon there just to sort of stop the splashing chunks from messing up my day. And there we go, guys. If I had some chowder biscuits, I would fry them in a pan right now and I just lay them along the edge here. And then you've got chowder. Perfect chowder. Best damn chowder on Martha's Vineyard right there. All right, cool. So that has been my chowder experience. I hope you guys enjoyed yourselves.
That's great, Chris.
We got some questions done during. I'm very happy I chopped my vegetables before because that is a fast-paced chowder. You can cook it slower, I promise. You don't have to go that fast. But awesome. Is there any more questions before we say goodbye for the night and I tuck in?
Chris, it's Virginia.
Yes.
I just want to thank you for steaming open the quahogs and making that beautiful broth, because I personally have a really hard time opening clams, and I never, had one of those horrible occurrences but I've come close, and just it's such a great reason not to even try doing that, because you get all the juice and the deliciousness, and the broth turns out so great. And as you say, it's better in the soup.
Yep, exactly.
Thank you. I always felt inauthentic and a wimp, but not now.
Yeah, no, don't ever feel like a wimp ever. Anyone who hounds you for being inauthentic is not an authentic person themselves. You should never be upset with people for doing things the way they want to, especially with food, because it's their body. They can put whatever they want into it. So yeah, don't ever listen to the traditionalists. They tend to have sticks in places that we won't talk about.
Chris, why don't you just give us a teaser for the February 10th?
Beautiful. So we will be doing a little bit of a lover's meal. Most of the food we've been cooking has been fairly large batch, family style. But this one's going to be a meal for 2. It's going to be really intense. We're going to use some really nice protein. Maybe I've said too much already. But it will be a lover's meal, and we're going to make a beautiful side dish that was inspired by our lovely director at Eggertown. So I'm really excited to tell you guys all about it. I'm really excited to practice it in the meantime. And I hope you guys like it. It's going to be really, really good, and a beautiful showcase of some of our local fauna and flora. So I'm very, very excited about it.
That's great. Thank you so much, Chris. And also, why don't you mention Trash Panda, because that's where you're going to be posting recipes.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm literally staring at this bowl of chowder right now, like, gonna eat you. So Trash Panda EPL at wordpress.com or .wordpress.com. That's Trash Panda EPL for Edgartown Public Library. This recipe is going up tomorrow, and we'll also put the video up on our YouTube page in case you missed any of it. The recipe is really great. I feel like it's simple. It definitely pays to do your prep beforehand and just focus on the cooking. So do your chops, get them ready, and it'll be up on the website tomorrow, as well as everything else I've cooked on this program, as well as everything I've cooked since quarantine started. So there's a lot of really fun stuff there, some good drinks. I haven't done any cocktails lately. Maybe I should do one for the lover's meal.
For two, yes, absolutely. Great
All right.
idea.
I got to come up with one of those quick then.
I trust that you'll be able to do it.
Yeah, me too. All right, guys, thanks so much for coming, and just eat well, enjoy life.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Let's see if she
Thanks
comes.
very much.